This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Protests rage in Beirut as anger builds up over last week's deadly explosion. Gunmen kill a group of aid workers in Niger. French citizens are among the victims. And environmental concerns escalate in Mauritius after a major oil spill reaches its coastlines. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Botswana's rough diamond exports fall by 68% in the second quarter of this year. And in our continuing series, Made in Africa, we explore the intricate skills of carpet makers in Egypt. In our top story this hour, we start in Lebanon, where the political elite is facing pressure from all sides. Protesters are demanding the resignation of the entire government. They claim last week's deadly explosion would not have happened were it not for alleged corruption and incompetence of the government. The explosion devastated Beirut and took the lives of at least 158 people. The catastrophe has since revived mass anti-government protests that had for months demanded the removal of Lebanon's political elite. Prime Minister Hassan Diab has said he may propose early elections to try and resolve the political crisis. Well, let's bring you the very latest now from Lebanon. We are joined by CGTN's Adel Al-Maghrawi live in the capital, Beirut. Adel, as we know, protests have been raging in Lebanon since that deadly explosion in Beirut last week. Just tell us, what is the latest now on this growing unrest?
Well, there are calls continuing for back-to-back protests all week long until the government resigns, the parliament resigns. There's a full demand from those young activists and protesters. They want to see the entire regime basically stands down and pave the road for another election. But since Saturday, the momentum of these protests have been more or less quite fading. We've seen less protesters on Sunday than those on Saturday. Still, there was violence persistent among these rallies. Today, there are calls for the rallies to begin at the government's headquarters, where Prime Minister Hassan Diab is holding a cabinet meeting, will hold a cabinet meeting in a couple of hours to discuss the wave of political resignations that he has been facing and his country, as well as his plan or initiative to pave the road for early election and for himself to stand down as the entire cabinet moves forward towards more or less giving the public what they want, but rather indirectly.
And so, Adele, from what you're saying, is it likely then that we'll see early elections being called, or what could be a major reshuffle of government?
So, Lindy, the number of cabinet members, the ministers that are resigning, are increasing. It started with the information minister, then the environment minister. Today, the justice minister have submitted his resignation, and there are others who are considering. The interior minister, for example, says that he would be putting down a huge responsibility if he steps down, in a political indication that he might be considering it, but still the duty calls for him. That's a perspective. The government will be discussing today the possibility that they all put on the resignation. The parliament are also, about 10 members of parliament have resigned. The parliament will be holding a session probably on Thursday to investigate the blast and the government responsibility. The government may put its full resignation before that. There's more or less a political battle between the government and the parliament on which should hold the other accountable. But in general, even if the government prime minister's plan to push for early elections, that means that the entire system all the way up to the president will be subject to these election. This will be clarified in today's meeting after the cabinet concludes its meeting. But meanwhile, the calls for protest continue as Lebanese people remain in the street trying to clear the debris, trying to clear the rubble, cleaning the country after a massive economic and political shock because of that blast.
Well, Adel Al-Makhraoui, thank you so much for that update. Joining us there live from Beirut, Lebanon. Let's turn now to news coming out of Niger. Gunmen have attacked a group of aid workers. They've killed 6 French citizens, their local guide and a driver. The incident took place near Kure town in Tillaberi. The region attracts tourists who want to see the last herds of giraffe in West Africa. Tuli Shabalala has more.
The assault took place at around 11:30 a.m. on Sunday, just 6 kilometers east of the town of Kure. The Kure Giraffe Reserve, southeast of Niamey, is a popular attraction in Niger. Officials say the gunmen arrived on motorcycles and opened fire. Most of the victims were French citizens. Niger's defense officials say the French nationals worked for ACTED, an international aid group. It is not yet clear who was behind the attack, but jihadist groups have become increasingly active in Niger. The French government has advised against travel to large parts of the West African country. French President Emmanuel Macron is reported to have spoken on the phone with his Niger counterpart, Mahamadou Issoufou. Both leaders condemned the attack. The Tillaberi region is in a hugely unstable location, near the borders of Mali and Burkina Faso. The region has become a hideout for Sahel jihadist groups. Numerous Europeans have been abducted or killed in the volatile region. The use of motorcycles has been banned in Niger since January. This is an attempt to curb the movements of such jihadists. Fighters with links to Al-Qaeda and ISIL have mounted increasing attacks across West Africa's Sahel region in recent years. That's despite the presence of thousands of regional and foreign troops. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Well, let's find out what the response from France has been on news of this attack. Joining me live now from Paris is CGTN's Ross Cullen. Ross, to begin with, what is the latest from French authorities since this attack in Niger?
Hi, Lindy. We've learnt that there will be a meeting of a special defence council here in Paris tomorrow to learn more and see what the response could be from France at a ministerial, at a governmental level, and that will be held under the authority of French President Emmanuel Macron, and his team at the Élysée Palace here in Paris released a statement overnight condemning this attack, saying that it was a cowardly attack on aid workers who were there to support the local population. And it was confirmed that President Macron did speak to his Nigerian counterpart, Mahamadou Issoufou, and both men sending their condolences to the families of the victims. But that's the latest. There will be a special defence council, and France will want to learn more, and both presidents have said that they will use all means to try to understand all the circumstances surrounding this attack.
And Ross, as we know, France, of course, has troops stationed in Niger. Are we likely to see them play some kind of active role in pursuing the attackers from this incident, and perhaps in the short and long term, playing a role in combating general insecurity in Niger?
Well, we have heard on Twitter from President Macron this morning, and he's been saying again, underlining what was put forward in that statement, saying that he stands by partners in the region, that he again extends his condolences to the families of the victims, to the 6 French people who died and the 2 Nigerians who lost their lives in the attack as well. And he's been responding on Twitter to other tweets from his Nigerian counterpart, the President Mahamadou Issoufou, saying that France has never failed Niger and it stands alongside the country in its fight against armed groups and terrorism. And as you mentioned, that fight includes 5,000 French troops in the greater region as well, supporting the G5 group of countries, not just Niger, but also Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso and Mauritania, in what's known as Operation Barkhane. France has fighter jets, armoured personnel carriers, just tries to support those local partners in the fight against armed groups. But President Macron and his Nigerian counterpart saying that despite this attack, which will surely be an attempt to destabilise support for the region and again to try to challenge those French forces and also the local forces that are in the area. Ministers here in Paris and ministers in Niamey saying that both countries are unbowed despite this attack.
Ross Cullen, thank you so much for giving us the response from France on that attack in Niger. Well, let's go to Nigeria now, where the government has denied allegations over the military recruitment of reformed Boko Haram members. The government has been carrying out a rehabilitation and reintegration program for terrorists, a move aimed at ending a decade-long war on insurgency. Correspondent Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja.
No former Boko Haram militant has been recruited by the military, according to a statement by presidential spokesperson Garba Shehu issued on Thursday. Nor are there intentions or plans by the government to absorb reformed fighters into the military because it is against the code of ethics guiding the program, he added. Now, the statement sought to debunk rumors about the government's de-radicalization, rehabilitation and reintegration program tagged Operation Safe Corridor. Shehu reassured the public that the program, which was launched by the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration in 2015, is supported by various international organizations like the European Union and the United Nations. In June, the military announced that over 600 repentant Boko Haram members were ready for reintegration into their communities after completing their program. However, rumors on social media became rife when allegations from the governor of Borno State, Babangana Zulum, suggested that members of the Nigerian military were involved in an attack on his convoy last week. Some Nigerians reacted to this claim, saying that the attack could have been carried out by former Boko Haram members who may have been recruited into the army. But according to the presidential spokesperson, the public should disregard any misinformation about the program, which he maintained as part of efforts by the government to end the insurgency in the northeast. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, turning to the coronavirus pandemic now, the U.S. continues to lead the world in COVID-19 infections, now topping 5 million with over 164,000 deaths. President Trump has been criticized for signing executive orders extending stimulus measures unilaterally. That's after Democrats and Republicans failed to agree on the latest relief package. Toby Muse has the details from Washington.
After President Donald Trump's announcement of a series of measures aimed at kickstarting the American economy and also protecting the economically vulnerable, Washington is trying to figure out exactly how much of an impact they'll have on the economy. The measures announced by Trump include helping renters avoid eviction in certain cases and easing payments for those with student loans. But the major announcement was a $400 a week bonus for the unemployed. This replaces a $600 a week bonus for the unemployed, but that program ended at the end of July. But already it's unclear how viable the policy is, with the president himself acknowledging it's likely to be challenged in the courts. And the financing is far from certain. The federal government will pay 75%, with the local states paying the remainder. But there is a fear that states have seen their finances battered by the coronavirus and they may not have the money ready. Democrats wasted little time in criticizing the president's announcement, saying it's wholly insufficient to get the economy back to health again.
We're not stalemate because the Republicans have, from the start, never understood the gravity of the situation that we are in. They have called it a hoax. They've called it their delay, denial, distortion of this pandemic. And we cannot open our economy or open our schools safely unless we address the pandemic.
Trump announced these measures after Republicans and Democrats were unable to seal a deal. The reason being their positions are so far apart. The Democrats are looking for a $3.4 trillion stimulus package. The Republicans are offering up a $1 trillion package, with many Republicans saying even that's too generous. Republicans blame Democrats for inserting a laundry list of items into the negotiations, so inflating the overall price and making any deal that much harder to achieve.
We said, tell us where you are in a compromise for state and local. They said, we're at $1 trillion. We said, tell us where you are in enhanced unemployment. We told the American people we'll keep it at 600 while we negotiate. For a week or two, they refused to do that.
The question is this it? Or will Democrats and Republicans get back to the negotiating table and come up with a bipartisan economic stimulus plan? Because as it stands, the president's announcement of these new measures may not be enough to get the American economy back into gear. Toby Muse reporting for CGTN, Washington.
Well, here in Kenya, bars, restaurants and other entertainment spots are struggling due to the coronavirus. Thousands of restaurants have been forced to close, and for those still operating, business is only getting harder. Last month, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta banned the sale of alcohol in public spaces as part of efforts to contain the further spread of COVID-19. Restaurant owners say this has affected the ongoing viability of the food and beverage industry.
Inti, located in the Kenyan capital Nairobi, was once a vibrant and busy restaurant. It's one of many under the food library groups of restaurants. But today, anti-pandemic measures have led to empty seats. Social distancing rules have also reduced the number of customers allowed to dine in.
It's a major hit. Being last 6 months, we are operating with 98% slashed down business. All matters that keep our guests safe to come and dine, we maintain that. It will take a time to people to come and accept and adapt to the changes and start coming and dining in restaurants.
Each and every day I wake up coming here, I know at least when I go back home, there's something I'm taking back to my family. I have hope that I'm going to clear most of my bills, so it is really, really important.
The Kenyan body governing pubs, entertainment and restaurants, PERAC, estimates that around 40% of venues nationwide have been forced to close. The food and beverage industry thrives on a constant flow of social gatherings. And PERAC is trying to keep both customers and staff safe.
As PERAC, what we've tried to engage, and we came up with the protocols, and we thank the government for allowing us to actually be part of that. When we talk about the protocols, it involved money. It was not just something you wake up and you start, running with.
With the current restrictions in place, PERAC fears that millions more of Kenyans could lose their livelihoods. The body says establishments have already lost more than $92,000 million as of June this year. Chamgono, CGTN.
Well, still in Kenya, the National Authority on Drugs and Alcohol says alcohol consumption is on the rise. That's despite a ban on alcohol in bars and restaurants. Online sales and home delivery services have made it easier for young people in particular to access alcohol. Robert Nagila reports on this growing trend.
On a highway outside Nairobi, footage captured by a motorcycle rider shows two vehicles racing, putting other motorists at risk. Seconds later, a cloud of dust rises ahead. As they approach the scene, they discover the two vehicles have crashed. Is everyone okay? The biker asks. We're fine, this lady responds. Then a young man with a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a paper cap in another emerges from one of the vehicles. He appears intoxicated. According to Movindi International, an advocacy group, more and more people in Kenya are turning to alcohol to pass time and have started to use it to cope with the stresses of the pandemic and being in isolation. Since the closure of bars as part of containment measures by the government to control the spread of COVID-19, there's been a surge in online alcohol sales. Experts say online alcohol sales has made it easier for young people to access alcohol. The National Authority Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, says containment measures have brought an unprecedented increase in alcohol intake at home, exposing children. At the Wonder Peace Rehab Center in Kiambu County, the center's manager says they are bracing for a crisis.
They have not closed down the wines and spirits or the takeaways. People are taking away alcohol, drinking at home.
The center says it's witnessed an increase in the number of people seeking help.
The rate of admissions are very high compared to the cases before Corona.
Even more worrying for Njuguna is that many of the new cases are young people.
Even clients who are 15, 16 years old, they were at school, but now because they are no longer going to school, they started using.
The center is advising parents to take a keen interest in how their children are spending their time.
There is really need for the parents to do a lot of engaging with a lot of activities. I would also suggest you find families there are people who have picked up the behavior of even exercising together. It's still something that can really work.
With the government review of containment measures expected in the next couple of weeks, Nakada wants the government to limit the sale of alcohol further before the situation turns into a crisis. Robert Magila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Meanwhile, a United Nations survey has shown that drug dependency is on the rise in Nigeria, with the trend accelerating during the coronavirus lockdown. Kelechi Emekalam brings us the details.
A session to help those struggling with addiction ongoing at this rehab center in northern Nigeria. Derang, whose full identity is concealed, checked himself into this facility after months of substance abuse. Aside from being influenced by his peers, Derang says he drank excessive alcohol and used drugs to ease his stress, a habit that spiraled into an uncontrollable addiction. But he's glad that he's able to get help here.
In this part of the world, there is a lot of stigmatization when it comes to therapy or rehabilitation. For a person, I decided on my own to check myself into a rehabilitation system. This would be my second month in this facility, and although I would say that although I was aware of some things that would happen, but it has been a journey that has been fulfilling.
A 2018 UN drug survey reports that 14.3 million people are drug dependent in Nigeria, and new data from UN suggests more people are abusing opioids and other illegal substances amid the COVID-19 lockdown.
Boredom is one of the major triggers for drug abuse. So boredom, unemployment, underemployment, the fact that people are at home, unable to go out, unable to work. Stress is also a major trigger for substance abuse and relapse. So because a lot of people are going through financial difficulties, a lot of people have lost their jobs, they're unemployed, they're underemployed. And so this stress, is something that they look for ways to cope. And for many people, that coping mechanism will be will result in substance abuse.
Nigeria's Drug Law Enforcement Agency reports that it has been seeing more drug-related crimes.
We have been at work because if we stop to work because of the pandemic, the drug criminals will continue to work irrespective of the pandemic. We have been able to seize several kilograms, or let's say tons, of even cannabis, because like I told you, is the major local threat. A state like Kogi, you will be surprised, has been able to seize 6 tons of cannabis during this pandemic. Benue has seized 3 tons. Edo has seized over 1 ton.
Mental health experts credit family breakdown, mood disorders, and chemical imbalance as some of the factors responsible for drug abuse. For many, the road to recovery could be months or even years, And psychologists proposed routine emotional health checks and having a strong support network to help prevent future relapses. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Environmental concerns escalate in Mauritius after a major oil spill reaches its coastlines. And in our continuing series, Made in Africa, we explore the intricate skills of carpet makers in Egypt. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Over in Mauritius now, thousands of residents, students and environmental activists have been racing to contain an oil spill. The oil spill off the island nation is from a Japanese ship that ran aground on a coral reef. Officials estimate that 1,000 tons of oil from the ship's cargo has escaped into the Indian Ocean. Satellite images show a dark slick of what appears to be oil spreading near wetlands that the government calls very sensitive. Efforts by ship workers to try and stop more oil from leaking are reported to have been hampered by heavy winds and rough seas. Officials in Mauritius have reported new cracks to the ship's hull, while wildlife workers and volunteers have been trying to save animals and rare plant species from an island near the spill. They have relocated dozens of baby tortoise to the mainland.
Government was acting on the advice of the company, on their experts, etc., without taking the best interest of the people of Mauritius and the best interest of what should be done to protect our country, our lagoon, from a potential, it was a potential spillage at that time, and this is gross negligence by government. I mean, the whole island has been taken by a shock with this spillage, the whole island, and people for all sectors, civil society, NGOs, service clubs, university students, the private sector is very much involved in terms of resources, vehicle transport. The straws come from their fields. A lot of these supports are coming from them, and eventually all these people now are getting organized to do that. Yes, the civil society has taken over the state in this endeavor to try to mitigate the spillage.
Well, let's bring you more now on this worrying situation in Mauritius. Christina Fefe joins me live from Port Louis, the capital. Christina, this oil spill, as we understand, has now reached the coastlines of Mauritius. What more can you tell us about what's happening at the moment?
Hi, Lindy.
Yes, I can hear you, Christina. If you can hear me, can you just give us an update on what's been happening and the effect this oil spill is having on the Mauritius coastline?
The effect that it's having on the coastline? Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Christina. Do tell us.
Hello?
All right, unfortunately, we will have to leave that there. Let's move on to some other news now. The U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services has met with Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen. Alex Azar arrived in Taiwan on Sunday. It is the highest level American visit since China and the U.S. established diplomatic ties in 1979. Beijing has condemned the trip, saying it breaks long-standing China-U.S. agreements. CGTN's Zheng Chunying has the details. Fortunately, we can't bring you that story for now. Let's now go to Hong Kong, where police have arrested 9 activists, including media tycoon Jimmy Lai, for allegedly colluding with foreign forces. The arrests are under the new national security law, which came into force in June. Lai is the founder of media network Next Digital, which backed protests in the city last year. He was also charged with conspiracy to defraud. 2 of his sons are among the 7 arrested. TikTok is preparing to sue the Trump administration in response to an executive order banning its operations in the United States. The U.S. broadcaster National Public Radio reports the company will file a federal lawsuit in Southern California on Tuesday. It says the lawsuit will argue President Trump's executive order is unconstitutional because it failed to give the company a chance to respond. The company will also argue that the order is based on pure speculation and conjecture and has no findings based on fact. Once it goes into effect, Trump's executive order will ban all transactions related to the company, which may eventually cause the app to be unmanageable and non-functional. The ban will also make it impossible for American lawyers to represent TikTok in U.S. legal proceedings, which the company will argue is a violation of its due process rights. The Wall Street Journal reports a U.S. government contractor has embedded software in over 500 mobile apps that track users without their knowledge. It says the company, Anomaly 6, can follow the locations of hundreds of millions of mobile phones worldwide. The Wall Street Journal says Anomaly 6 can track users if the apps in which it's embedded have access to GPS data. The report also says the company has ties to U.S. defense and intelligence communities. But Anomaly 6 responded to the Wall Street Journal, saying it only sells the data to non-governmental private sector clients. Recapping your headlines, the political elite in Lebanon is facing pressure from all sides. Protesters are demanding the resignation of the government. They claimed last week's deadly explosion would not have happened were it not for corruption and incompetence. The explosion devastated Beirut and took the lives of at least 158 people. In Niger, gunmen have attacked a group of aid workers. They've killed 6 French citizens, their local guide and a driver. The incident took place near Kure town in Tillaberi. The region attracts tourists who want to see the last herds of giraffe in West Africa. Niger's defense officials say the French nationals worked for ACTED, an international aid group. And in Mauritius, thousands of residents, students and environmental activists have been racing to contain an oil spill. The spill of the island nation is from a Japanese ship that ran aground on a coral reef. Officials estimated that 1,000 tons of oil from the ship's cargo has escaped into the Indian Ocean. And here's what's coming up in your business news. Botswana's rough diamond exports fall by 68% in the second quarter of this year. And the World Bank approves $114 million in aid to Nigeria's pandemic response.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Botswana's rough diamond exports have sunk by 68% in the second quarter of this year. The coronavirus pandemic has hit demand hard, while global travel restrictions have also hurt trading. Exports of diamonds from a joint venture between Botswana and Anglo-American diamond mining giant De Beers stood at $293 million in the second quarter of 2020. That's down from $916 million posted in the first quarter of this year. No exports were recorded in May, while only $20 million worth of diamonds were exported in June. Botswana closed its borders in March, locking out international travelers who traditionally visit Gaborone to view and buy diamonds. The World Bank has approved a $114 million loan to help Nigeria tackle the coronavirus pandemic. The global lender says the money comes in the form of a $100 million loan and a $14 million grant. It will be split between Nigeria's 36 states and federal level procurement of medical equipment, tests and medicine. The World Bank says Nigeria has ramped up its efforts to contain the outbreak, but more needs to be done to boost frontline response. The West African nation has recorded more than 45,000 cases and 945 deaths so far, but low levels of testing have left a muddy picture of the outbreak's severity. Well, Africa might find itself caught in the middle of a dispute between China and the US over Huawei's participation in the development of 5G networks. The US has been piling pressure on its allies to block the Chinese telecoms giant from the development of the next generation 5G wireless networks. The rollout of 5G technology is now becoming a major topic of discussion in some African countries like Nigeria. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with that story.
Penetration has been expanding rapidly in Nigeria lately. Broadband penetration is currently at 40%, and the government is hoping to push that up to 80% or 180 million people within the next 5 years. 4G network is still the dominant technology in Nigeria and is still not widespread, but the government and the country's telecoms industry are already considering 5G deployment.
We have done a field trial of 5G. It was done sometime late last year. Systems have been dimensioned to accommodate 5G. Networks are ready to work on 5G. So I think as an industry and as a country, we are fully prepared and we are good to go and ready to go on 5G technology.
But not everyone in the industry shares that view.
We're not likely to see any kind of 5G, serious 5G deployment start in the region until 2025. So we have some work to do catching up with 4G. I think the 5G discussion for West Africa in particular at this point is a serious distraction.
Whatever the case, 5G will eventually come to Africa and in particular Nigeria, considering its huge market. So at some point, the country may feature in the 5G network dispute between China and the United States. And it's not surprising some industry experts in Nigeria are already weighing in on the dispute.
The US was a little bit, they lag behind in terms of the technology to go to market. And China is ready with absolutely everything to say, okay, fine, we have end-to-end solutions to make 5G worth your investment, And so if you look at it, it's purely majorly rather based on interest concerns and, wrapped around security concerns.
What I do know is that telecoms is universal. It is the only infrastructure that connects all of us across the world. And the more we all participate in the development of the international telecom space, the better for all of us. We are now in the new normal, so we all need each other to be able to get things going. And so I would say beyond any political consideration, parties should consider where best they can source equipment that will support the development of their national infrastructure.
China is an important trade partner of Nigeria, and Huawei is already a big player in the country's telecoms industry. So it's a no-brainer that when the government here eventually gives the all clear for the deployment of 5G, the Chinese telecoms giant may have a prominent role to play in the process. But what no one can actually tell at the moment is how the US, another important trade partner of Nigeria, will react. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be the leading player in Africa in the spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
And now to our continuing series, Made in Africa. On the outskirts of the Egyptian capital, Cairo, in a village called Harania, a beautiful experiment began decades ago. In 1952, an Egyptian architect, Ramses Wisawasef, believed that all children are artistic. He wanted to dig deeper into how to trigger their creativity. The result was a unique experiment in tapestry weaving. It has produced extraordinary works from a regular Egyptian village. And these tapestries have been collected by museums and galleries across the world. The Ramses Wisawasef Art Center is now a place that has empowered Egyptian villagers. They have earned more income and had a chance to tour the world.
My name is Ikram Noshi. I am the director of the Ramses Wisawasef Art Center. Ramses Wisawasef wanted to prove his idea and creativity with the children, so he chose an ordinary Egyptian village which had no arts or crafts whatsoever, and invited children from the age of 11 to come and weave. It is sometimes strange for people to understand why an architect will choose weaving to experiment or to demonstrate his experiment, because weaving is a very slow craft. It is challenging to the children. When they will finish the small piece of weaving or tapestry they have in front of them, they will have a great sense of achievement. We have 3 rules. The first rule is we don't show children any drawings to copy. We don't discuss or show them any other forms of art. The final and third rule was we don't criticize the children. Ramses Wisawasef was a professor of history of architecture and history of art. He understood very well the importance for any craft or art to survive, that you must have the basic tools and the basic raw materials which you need. So the wool is Egyptian local sheep wool. The warp is made of Egyptian cotton, which is the background of the tapestry. Remains the color. The color is the most important thing. He knew that through history, natural vegetable plants were always used. They existed in Egypt, they existed in the Middle East. Many of them, they have disappeared. And he reintroduced them again in our garden here. So now we plant our own dyes. The first recognition to the art center started in 1958, when we were invited to the first international exhibition in Basel in Switzerland. From that year, the outside world knew about the special school of weaving Ramses Wisawasef started. We've been invited since to museums and exhibitions all over the world. What is special about our tapestry is that each one of these works is one of a kind. That means we don't have a design the artist or the weaver copy from. They choose their own tapestry one by one. And of course, the beauty of the natural vegetable dyes which we color all our wool with. This is really what makes our tapestry stand out. One of a kind and the natural colors. This work has changed the life of the children who started here. They are no longer children. They started when they were 11, now they are 40 to 55 years of age. This is the only way they make their living. They take about 40% of the final sale of the tapestries. Between 25 to 30 goes to the material itself, the wool and the colors and everything. And between 25 to 30%, this is what the art center receives from the sale of these tapestries. So it has transformed their life. They live in better conditions. And you know, they travel all around the world. It has empowered women because the majority of the weavers here are women, so it has empowered them and their families. They have a say in how their family should run because they are big contributors to the economy of family, you know, the small family. But, you know, I don't know how it affects Egypt as a whole, but it's something, it's a good window for, you know, beautiful, creative handcraft.
Now let's turn to another of our special series, the China-Africa Idea Lab. Today we bring you the story of one young man from Sierra Leone who is based in Beijing. Lloyd Randall wears many hats, a TV presenter, actor and documentary filmmaker. His journey in China has brought him a wide variety of experiences, but not without facing some obstacles along the way. He shared his story with our reporter, Waylon Tang.
It's been a long day for Lloyd Randall. One of the many long days he's had during the 15 years on and off that he's been here. Though standing tall at 186 centimeters, Lloyd Randall from Sierra Leone in Western Africa carries himself with humility. And I'm glad I was able to interview him sitting down.
When I first got here, I couldn't speak a word of Chinese. I would say we are like the harbingers, you know, the first wave of Africans and black people to come into China in large numbers. So obviously it was a different thing with a different language, a culture. I pretty much literally came to China as an adolescent, and I've become a man in China. So technically I did grow up in China.
Lloyd earned both his bachelor's and master's degrees in Beijing. Since 2016, he's been working at Star Times, a Chinese media company that broadcasts on TV channels in Africa. And what a ride of a lifetime he's had. Lloyd was one of the lead anchors for the 2018 FIFA World Cup held in Russia. In 2019, he traveled to Germany and hosted a documentary on the 30th anniversary of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. And away from his day job, he was cast as a stunt double for former world heavyweight champion boxer Mike Tyson in the movie China Salesman.
I was also at the Basketball World Cup. I was right there courtside for the final between Argentina and Spain. So this journey with Star Times has been, again, another word I like to use, a blessing, because I've seen so many things. I've been around the world. I've had experiences which I never dreamed of possible.
Would you say that you were and still are in China at the right time?
I think I came at a time where China was becoming this, you know, this giant the sleeping giant was getting awoken. So I thought my timing was perfect. Just before the Olympic Games, things were booming. There were more foreigners coming here to the country. So from that perspective, I kind of made a very strategical geopolitical move because I also knew China and Africa were building these relationships, both economically, culturally. So I felt if I learned Chinese, I understood the culture, I would be at a vantage point.
But with all that said, though, your journey in China wasn't an easy one. So what were some of the main challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
I would put it this way. People just didn't understand us culturally. And when I got here, there were not so many black people in China at that time. So there were some negative experiences I had being a black man and an African in China. Sometimes a job would prefer a white person over me. That was very difficult. But my mentality in life is kind of like this. I always had good Chinese friends. So maybe if I go onto the subway and someone is going to sit next to me, but I remember I've got 4 or 5 friends who are Chinese, if I have a problem, I can call them and all of a sudden they'll be right there to, you know, give me a helping hand. So I always try to balance things on equilibrium. You know, for every negative experience, I think about the good things I have.
I think it's a very wise point that you brought up, right? With every one not ideal experience that you stumble upon, there's always like more good experiences to sort of counterbalance it. But was this a good enough reason for you to actually stay on in China?
I realize Sino-African relationships right now is booming because I feel like Africans have understood the way the West thinks, the way China thinks, and as Africans, we have to choose which of these two work for us to our advantage and we can have a symbiotic relationship.
What kind of gaps are existing at the moment between China and Africa? And as an African youth in China, what is it exactly that you would like to see when it comes to a symbiotic relationship? And how can you play a part in it?
Now, I would like to see infrastructure being more long-term over there in Africa. I would also like to see a point where if Chinese workers go to Africa, instead of being in a cocoon where they're just with their other colleagues together, they can kind of branch out a little bit, understand the culture they're in. We are more similar than we know. With regards to the way we treat our families, I will feel Africans and Chinese have a greater responsibility to their families. So in that regard, we're very similar.
Having been in China for almost half of his life, Lloyd isn't sure how much longer he will be here.
But even if at some point in time, which is normal, I do leave China, I do consider here as part of me. So I will always come back to China in one capacity or the other. I could be visiting, I could be working, I could be a tourist. So a part of me is deeply ingrained in China. Foreigners always say, I will leave China, but I'm telling you, people always come back. I have a friend from Holland. I'm leaving China, I'm done, it's over. A year later, Lloyd, I want to come back. So
because the pull factor is
yes.
just so strong.
Yes. So yeah. You can never say never.
Wei Lin Tang, CGTN, Beijing.
Your sports news coming up next. Coming up, new health protocols in South Africa will help the resumption of sports in the country.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your sports news, the continued disruptions caused by COVID-19 have wreaked havoc on the schedules of teams who rely on air travel to honor their fixtures, as well as individual athletes who need to fly to events all over the world. CGTN's CS Duplessis takes a look at the impact of these disruptions.
The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on sport has been devastating, to say the least. It has led to the postponement of events like the Olympic Games and the Africa Cup of Nations. Stadiums stand empty and frustrated athletes are training at a less than optimal level. Restricted air travel has also prevented teams from getting around as they did in the past, and all that is left is the so-called new normal, which is not very normal at all.
Some of the protocols that we see from a safety perspective moving through airports are going to stay. I suspect personally that masks will be a commonplace occurrence. I think temperature testing, etc., will be key. And again, a renewed kind of awareness in the consumer space for, has this been sanitized? Is it sealed for my protection? Is it ready for me to use safely and without concern?
The novel coronavirus is extremely contagious, and because it affects everyone differently, it is difficult to predict what symptoms an athlete will show.
COVID-19 has so many unknowns with regards to athletes that become infected. A lot of the current protocols are based on what we are learning every day. With athletes, the concern is related to the impact of the virus on various organ systems in the body, particularly the cardiovascular system. But this could vary from athlete to athlete, and most of the athletes that I work with who have tested positive have been asymptomatic or very mildly symptomatic for a day or two.
Flying on domestic airlines is something many have taken for granted, but now as the world deals with COVID-19, the reality is the approach to travel has changed dramatically, with new safety protocols in place to make sure travelers reach their destination in good health.
Masks are required throughout an entire journey over your face and nose. There are specific things that we're doing to board in small groups to try and encourage social distancing, and similarly to disembark. You'll find that we disembark now very much row by row by row, and you need to remain seated until such time as you get up. So there are lots of little details that are in place, and flying's quite a different experience these days.
The movement of teams across South Africa will become easier over the next few months, but the safety precautions enforced from point A to B could well become stricter.
Part of the new normal will be the way teams travel and the precautions and safety aspects that will have to be adhered to. The basics of risk mitigation would be to follow strict hand and respiratory hygiene, wearing of a face mask, and maintaining social distancing where possible. When it comes to the team environment, there will definitely be further strict protocols.
The approach to travel has changed completely, as intensive screening is now the standard. And although your passport is still very much a key travel document, it is the final temperature check that is the determining factor in whether or not you collect your boarding pass and take your seat on the aircraft or be left stranded at the boarding gates. CS Du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Turning to football now.